Oh my goodness. Welcome to season 6 of the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show. Yay. Y'all, I'm so excited because today we are kicking off the 6th season with such an amazing guest, but also such an amazing topic because I think a lot of us have forgotten that we still got work to do, and we do have work to do. So today we're really going to be diving into the crucial prelude of DEI and B, self understanding. Y'all, we're going to get all the way into yourself right after this. Shani, welcome to the show.
Hello, Dr. Kiki Ramsey. I am so happy and honored to be here with you.
Oh my
All of your
goodness.
Black girl magic.
You. I'm so excited for us to have this conversation. Y'all, if you don't know already, I have Shani Dellimore Barrax on the show today. She is, just a change agent for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And we met because somebody on my team decided that we should meet, and and you reached out and we reached out and we kind of made it happen. So I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today because I think what we're going to be talking about is so needed because I think people are starting to forget
Yeah,
that the work is not over.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Welcome.
Absolutely.
Welcome. All right. So as we're gonna dig in, before we like dive deep into this conversation, because it's gonna get juicy, because me and you pre-show and post-show.
Right. We always need more time.
We always be needing more time. But would you go ahead and introduce yourself to the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show audience?
Sure. I am Shani Dellimore Barrax. I just recently became Shani Dellimore Barrax. I used to be Shani Barrax Moore.
Okay.
I reclaimed my name. Dellimore is actually my mother's maiden name. And so that was really a choice that I made to give honor to the ancestors.
Okay.
And I have been a diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging practitioner for the better part of 26 years. It was not called that then. I started out doing racial justice work, and, because that's kind of important and is going to continue to stay important in this whole discussion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then expanded into being more of a generalist, a diversity, equity, and inclusion generalist. I've worked at higher education institutions, K-12 institutions, for-profit, nonprofit, and I just recently, I've always consulted in some capacity, but at the beginning of this year, I decided to take my consulting practice, Aurora Change Agency, full time. And a lot of it was really just a decision to do this work authentically, right?
Yeah.
And on my own terms. And I feel like I'm a lot more useful to people from this perspective, where I can provide strategic advisement, learning and development. I do coaching for folks who are early career, and that doesn't have to mean young. It can mean folks who are new to diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we saw so many people sort of flood space post 2020. And I often like to say I have DEI street cred. Because I've been doing this for so long.
Right.
And people that are coming to the space positing themselves as experts, and you just decided to call yourself that because DEI has become a hot topic. So
Yeah.
DEI street cred.
I love it. I love it. I'm telling you, the street cred is necessary, especially for those who really are in the trenches doing the work. And so I absolutely love that. If you are joining us live on the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show today, go ahead and drop your name and where you are tuning in from in the chat. Love to give you a shout out. All right. So tell us, my love, what is your biggest superpower, aka your strength?
So I think because I got started in this work doing study circles, it's a model that was popular in the 90s. And it's a facilitative process of guiding people towards their own awareness. And I think that is, because diversity, equity, and inclusion is more of an art than a science. And the feedback that I've gotten from folks, because my work is rooted in cultural humility, is that I provide opportunities for people to engage in perspective taking that are invitational rather than accusatory. And I think it's because that's kind of how I develop, is engaging in intentional perspective taking and thinking about how and why, particularly my identity-based experiences, could be different from others, which is really, what cultural humility is about. So that's, I think, what my superpower is. People will be like, well, that was uncomfortable, but I don't feel guilty. That didn't hurt. It's not supposed to hurt, but it is supposed to feel uncomfortable enough for you to grow.
Yes.
So I think that's what my superpower has become, at least based on other people's feedback.
No, I love that. And we're going to be getting into some of that today as well, because I think longer the days where, this work has to be fire and brimstone, like you is this and like nobody learns that way, period. Like they just don't. And so we've had, numerous conversations about how positive psychology is changing the game when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Right. And so y'all, things are to come. Things are to come.
Yes, things are to come.
And so I love that we're going to get into this topic. Sean from Atlanta, Georgia, thank you so much for joining us on the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show today. All right, so let's get into some real talk, because we can chat about it. I started off, today by saying that I think that this topic is so important because just because I think people are thinking that because something big has not happened in our society, like a George Floyd or anything like that, that the work is done. We've arrived. But
that makes me chuckle.
Right, yes. But I mean, I see that in a lot of organizations. Like a lot of organizations have ceased to stop talking about it. A lot of organizations have cut their chief diversity officer off of the payroll. We have things like Florida, who are trying to erase slavery from the history of
Texas too.
Right, in Texas, and take history books out of the classroom so they're not telling the truth. We have affirmative action that has been shot down. Tell me, what's the state of diversity, equity, and inclusion today from your eyes?
Performative. And I say that because many of the efforts that I have seen, and this is very germane to what we're going to talk about today, either typically are reactive rather than proactive. Yeah. It's what I affectionately like to call a something had happened. And then the effort is based upon what had happened was right, and you're rushing to look busy, do something, put some stuff on your website, hire a person who may not have any experience doing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging at all. They just may be a member of a minoritized group. They may have a passion for the work, but lack the proficiency. And so I think it's in a performative state, because I have found that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging seems to be one of the few practices that anybody thinks they could do without any kind of training. That, you've got these committees that form because they want to do the work, but have had absolutely no capacity building, coaching, learning, or development. Even the folks that use my Coursera, which is how we found each other. Yep. I've got a Coursera called Inclusion diversity, equity, and access essentials. But one Coursera does not an expert make.
Say it again.
Right?
Say it again.
One training, one anything, I don't care how great the training is, does not an expert make. And I have people say, well, what can I read? That's great, but the process needs to be facilitative.
Yes.
So I think that's why DEI has stalled out, that post George Floyd, everybody wanted to look busy. Well, we're supposed to be doing something. So let's just get something up on the website to say that we're doing something. Let's get some awards. Let's, check some boxes. And once we've got it up on our website, we don't have to talk about it anymore. And when it becomes substantive, when you really prime that space and allow people to have an opportunity to engage with their own personal self-reflection, cultural humility and awareness, and then have a facilitated process to engage with that, then people will see that, this work is never over.
No, it's not.
It's never over. But I think there are two different ends. There's the performative, look busy, make it look like you're doing something. And then there's the work that has been so substantive that people are being held accountable. Questions are being asked. Status quo is being challenged. I mean, this work is all about challenge everything.
Yeah.
Because the real talk is that I don't know too many organizations that were made for the two of us that are on the screen, right?
Oh, no.
So you're almost having to undo the socialization in organizations, in society.
Yeah.
I mean, this country was built upon the backs of our ancestors, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And people are like, oh, well, stop talking about slavery. When slavery isn't still the foundation of this country, and when we are still not treated like 3/5 of a human being. But that goes for members of the LGBT community, that goes for members of the disability community, pick a community, right? It looks done if you're not engaging with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're not empowering them
Yeah.
With some change agency. So, and I think because this work makes people feel uncomfortable, there are very few people that like being uncomfortable.
I mean, nobody really likes being
comfort, right? Nobody likes being
but that's what creates change, right? Uncomfortability creates change. And I'm seeing that, because people don't want to be uncomfortable, the change doesn't necessarily always happen.
Right.
But I commend those companies who understand that the work is not done. And you said something that was super important. The work is never going to be done. When we start thinking of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging as a fabric of what we do, right? I always say that leadership is not full leadership if it doesn't contain components of becoming more equitable, becoming more inclusive, becoming more, aware of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, you can't be, the best leader possible if you don't understand the tenets of what this is, right? And so I don't think you should ever separate DE&I from leadership, right? So when I talk about we do leadership development, it always includes DE&I, period, right? And so then we'll have companies that say, well, can you just do leadership and not D&I? They don't. We're not going to.
They're inextricably linked, right? I cannot be a good leader,
right,
without thinking about how you're going to create a culture of belonging where people don't have to manage their identity for your comfort.
Correct, Amando. I love it. Okay, so let's dig into the Crucial Prelude, right? Because we talk about this, and you said the Crucial Prelude to diversity, equity, inclusion is under self-understanding. Please do tell.
Sure. I've been doing this work a long time, but when I discovered the concept of cultural humility, which came out of the medical community at the end of the 90s and was coined by Melanie Tervalon and Jan Marie Garcia. It's I talk about how the difference between cultural competence and cultural humility is like a mirror. That cultural competence is turning the mirror outward and learning about other people's norms, practices, perspectives, perhaps, history, maybe. But cultural humility is turning the mirror inward on yourself and really examining your own identities, the role those identities play in your own perspectives, experiences, and interactions. And a critical piece that I get people to think about is how do those identities limit your perspectives or engagement with other people? Right. And the thing about it, Kiki, that I've noticed is that, people try to do, they might read a book and have a book club. Or have a discussion, but if you are not a practitioner, you might not know how to get people right up to their comfort zone and then facilitate their own awareness. People who aren't doing it in a facilitative way, you may not have ever reached the outside of your comfort zone. You might not even know what it looks like. Correct. You might not know what questions to ask to cultivate that cultural humility. So, and that's where I see, there's a graphic that I've started using. I love metaphors of sort of the ecosystem of inclusion. And I use a tree to demonstrate diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging efforts. And any tree that is going to yield branches, and the branches are the efforts that people are doing, if they're not rooted in soil that has been tilled with self-reflection, questioning your own biases, looking at things like how you were socialized, looking at things like the cycle of liberation of how you can de-socialize yourself, looking at identity development, then your branches are plastic. Those are fake trees.
We just got a whole bunch of fake trees.
Now then, my thumb is about as green as or is about as brown as my skin. So I can't grow nothing. All my trees are fake around my house. That said, though, because I know I am not good at it, it's the knowing that says, okay, the best I'm gonna be able to do is get some fake trees. What's happening with a lot of DEIB efforts, particularly the ones that are performative, they just want to show their branches. Look at what we're doing. They go to the doing before engaging with the being.
This is so true. Oh my God. I try to get this across, being a psychologist, right? But nothing changes till you change, right? Like behaviors are predicated on you changing and understanding and knowing yourself, right?
Well, and knowing is first, right? It's the knowing. Once you know yourself, particularly in this context, you might know yourself in relation to your partner, you might know yourself in relation to your children. But when we're talking about doing this work and doing it in a way that is ethical and responsible, because there's a whole lot of people out here calling themselves DEI folks and they're being reckless, that if you are not engaging in, those ahas of how my identities are juxtaposed to these efforts, then you just are trying to look busy and win some awards. And, I like to call it a self-hug. I'm interested and passionate. So therefore, I feel better about myself and I can hug myself and say I'm a great person. But you have done absolutely no work.
Right. Well, so this work of self reflection, self-understanding, what does it look like to, to a person who really is interested in diving deep in understanding this diversity, equity, inclusion, which so many people don't?
Sure. So I'll give you an example of an approach that I use. And I'm actually going to be using it with a client over the course of a 12-month inclusive leadership development program that I'm developing with them. We're using, so I mentioned the Coursera that I have, the Idea Essentials. And so what they're doing is using the Coursera to get the foundational information. Like everybody needs that foundational, the book, the Coursera. I encourage it to be something that is not just reading, but that it combines doing.
Right.
Sometimes don't know what the doing should be, which is why it's helpful to have someone to kind of facilitate this process. So you start with the foundational.
Yep.
And then the way I'm using that is taking that foundational knowledge and creating, developing a facilitative process.
Yes.
Where you're bringing people together. This work, you cannot become developed in this space in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It's got to be within the context of interpersonal engagement. So you start with, who am I? What are my perspectives? Where did they come from? You have to know questions to ask.
Yes.
To facilitate that development. And then creating curated opportunities, activities, queries with other folks who don't look like you.
Correct.
Very important. If you're doing this and you look around and everybody looks like you may be doing it in an echo tunnel. Right?
Yeah.
And so then once you have engaged in that structured interpersonal engagement, then you can begin to think about how to apply it to your organization or whatever environment that you're in. But people want to get to the doing. And I can't tell you how many times I've been called in to help an organization where they have this diversity and inclusion committee of people, willing participants, and they can't figure out why they're not making any progress. Because you don't even know what you're solving for.
Right.
You don't know enough. And and like I said, DEI seems to be the only thing that anybody thinks that they can do. And I think I was sharing with you that I actually had someone say that to me in a professional setting, who said, well, if you all are doing it, you all meaning this was a unit who, for whatever reason, was very affronted by the amount of Black women that were in our unit, but this was a unit full of white women, who said, well, if y'all are doing it, how hard can it be?
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I think that's why people think anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Because the packaging and the identities of many of us who do this work are often minoritized folks.
Yeah.
And so there's not a respect for the knowledge, for the practice. This is a practice and not a hobby.
Yeah, it's a life. It's life. It's what we live. It's what we all absolutely live. And so, we're coming towards time, but I really want to, know, in the sense of, somebody who does want to do some interpersonal work, right? Like, what are maybe, because as much as we would love to be in all organizations, I do feel like there are people out there who want to do this work, who really want to understand, who don't understand. What are some questions potentially they can ask themselves to begin doing this work, and then maybe take these questions back to the organization? Because the ultimate goal is I would love for them to reach out to us, right?
Yeah,
I want to lead the audience with something. If they are really wanting to start digging in and getting this self-introspection, what are some questions that they can do that with?
I think you start with what's your why. And I would say, because I'm a pro-side change management practitioner, and there's an acronym called ADKAR.
ADKAR.
Okay. It stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement.
Okay.
And so the awareness usually is, okay, I know I need to be doing something. The desire is really asking those questions. What's my why? And am I an ally or am I an accomplice? Am I someone who wants to be out front doing the work, or do I want to lift up the perspectives and experiences of those people who are often silenced, work in tandem with them? And if you yourself are either white or male or heterosexual or any of those things that aren't minoritized identities, seek out an understanding without asking folks to have to educate you.
Okay.
Right? So it's the educating yourself, and it's also decentering yourself in the work. And I think that's very difficult for some people to do. And begin to center the perspectives and experiences of the people you are claiming to advocate for.
Okay.
And that takes time.
Yeah.
Which is why I say you shouldn't step out saying that you can lead this without having engaged in what's your why, thinking about how am I going to seek out the knowledge and ability in the ADKAR. And in terms of, what you're trying to solve for, how do I even know that it's solved? What will success look like?
Absolutely.
And that could be, and if you're starting with yourself, again, you need to do that in community with other people.
Yeah.
So developing those really meaningful and authentic relationships with folks who don't look like you, and submitting, some people don't, when I was married, I didn't like that word submit, which is probably why I'm but
most people don't.
Right. Submitting yourself to someone who may know more than you about what it is you're trying to learn about.
Wow. No.
Because some people don't make very good beginners.
Yeah.
So the level of humility that is required to do this work, if you want to get into it because you think DEI is the new thing and maybe I can make some money, then you're centering yourself and you'll never be successful.
Yeah.
So spend some time engaging with cultural humility specifically.
Right.
And then, come up with those questions. The harder the question is to ask yourself, the more productive the process of answering the question will be.
Which is the reason why, thank you, Christopher. Which is the reason why I love coaching, right? The whole coaching, I think, goes well with this. And you mentioned, cultural humility. Humility, first of all, is a word that more of us need to practice because it's not something that may come easy for some. And so, oh my God, this has been such a beautiful conversation.
I can't believe it's over already.
I know. And I do feel like understanding ourselves is absolutely a critical prelude to DE&I, right? Like we need to really understand that I think if people can understand that and come to relationships in organizations around people with the understanding of self, half the problems that we face could be worked on a lot easier. I ain't say solve.
3/4 of the problems.
Right. There we go. It could literally, give us a beautiful baseline. All right. So please tell everybody what you got going on and where they can find you at, because I think these conversations and the facilitation that you do, it can be had by many.
Sure. My website is aurorachangeagency.com, my business name. I am working with a number of different organizations right now on this facilitative process, starting with the interpersonal, and then applying it to organizational culture of belonging. I've decided I want to be like you when I grow up and have something of a show. Like I want to have really an Ask Shani, because people have questions, particularly people that are doing this work.
Yeah.
I want to work with other DEI practitioners who realize that maybe they have some skill gaps to do the kind of one-on-one advisement and coaching, because that's one of the things I wish that I had, was somebody who had done this work for a while to go, okay, I'm working on this thing. Can I bounce this off of you? Like, does this make sense to you? And you really need someone with that knowledge to be able to do that guidance. So that's really what I've been doing, is just working with organizations that see me on things like this or hear me speak somewhere, that want me to take them through that not quick process, but meaningful process.
Yeah.
Of moving from self-reflection to organizational change.
I love it. Please, please, please check Shani out, and who knows, Ask Shani may be coming to a network near you.
Yeah, Dr. Kiki's gonna help me figure that out.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show. It's always a pleasure for us to get to talk. And of course, we would show up and both have on peak, and we both got sister locks, and we both,
that's just why we were supposed to be partners in progress.
So. There you go. I love it. I love it. I love it. So if this was beneficial to you all, please, please, please hit the share button. We want everybody to get the message that, hey, self-understanding is something that we all need in our lives, period. Right? You know how they say period. Yep. And if you're also a woman who wants community discussing things like this, I would love for you to join us over at Happy Women Lead. We are a community of women leaders who are striving to be happy while we lead and do all the things. All right, y'all. Until next time, y'all take care. Peace.
Progress.